hopefully if Andrew is out there, he is safe wherever he is. And it's a case that I think is really important that we still cover.
Just a quick disclaimer, the content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, crime scenes and other disturbing material. Listener discretion is advised.
This episode is sponsored by Think Forensic.
Think Forensic are a one-stop shop for all things forensic science and crime solving. They hold experience days, as well as corporate events, team building events, and general education for primary school right the way up to university level, as well as other events and consultancy. There's also a shop where you can get your hands on all things crime solving, from evidence gathering to packaging and collecting evidence, as well as other forensic science equipment.
For more information or to book on an experience day, please visit the website. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Grave Secrets. We're your hosts. I'm Annie.
And I'm Beth. Today we have an unsolved case for you. It's one of those where for us they're really tricky because it almost feels like we can't give people the answers.
Yeah.
But they go down really well. And obviously, I mean, not to say that we've got the biggest audience in the world, but if we were to find anyone that did have any information, that would be incredible. And we are always talking about giving a voice to the victims. And if there are any cases that kind of should be covered more by the general public, the press, whatever platform it may be.
Yeah, it's ones like this, isn't it?
It's ones like this.
Yeah, and even if this like jogs someone's memory, you know, even from, it is, you know, it's not the most recent case.
As Annie says, yes, this case is slightly older, but there's quite a lot of information there. And it's interesting, actually, because when I've been talking to people and saying that we were going to cover the case, it's one of those where, unfortunately, people remembered the case when I started describing it and when I showed them pictures.
Yeah.
But they had forgotten about it. So even if we're just jogging people's memory, it's important to keep the case alive.
Yeah, 100%. And this is sort of a local case to us. So it is South Yorkshire. So this is Doncaster. And we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Andrew Gosden.
So we're going to start before the disappearance, prior to the disappearance, and we're going to start in 2001. So Andrew was born on the 10th of July, 1993. As Annie said, born in Doncaster to his parents, Kevin and Glenys Gosden. He's got an older sister called Charlotte, and it again appears that they've got a really solid family foundation.
Yeah, he seemed to be quite close to his sister as well, didn't he?
I will say the majority of this information in this episode has come directly from Kevin himself. I mean, there's no point looking at other sources of information when
you've got direct from family members.
Yeah, when there's interviews with Kevin. So we've tried to avoid any hearsay because, unfortunately, what you get with a disappearance and a missing persons case is a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
So it's important to try and, discredit it where you can.
And stick to facts and what we actually know, so that we're giving you the accurate
and even if that's not a lot of information, that's the truth of it.
We'd rather do that as well, wouldn't we?
So, as I say, Andrew's family were quite close-knit. They did describe themselves as a Christian family. However, Glenys and Kevin decided actually not to christen their children because they wanted the kids to make their own mind up about religion, whether or not they were religious, and basically discover that path for themselves as individuals.
Yeah, so the family would be fine with it either way, they said, wouldn't they? I mean, when they were younger, the family used to take them to church.
Yeah.
But Kevin said more so, didn't he? We didn't have childcare, people to look after them.
Yeah.
They'd come to church with us, and then obviously they could make the choice later in life whether they wanted to continue with that.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was quite nice.
Yeah, I did. But again, that's the way it should be, isn't it?
Yeah.
So religion was never imposed on them, but they were a Christian family that were involved in the church. teachers say that Andrew, while he was at school, was quiet and quite shy, also quite small for his age, and that even by the age of kind of 14, he still looked like one of the younger kids in the year, looked more of the age of kind of a 12-year-old. And he actually had a couple of difficulties. So he's deaf in one ear, and he also has quite a strong eye prescription. So Andrew has always pretty much worn glasses. And again, at the time of his disappearance, was wearing glasses. So strong family foundation, and that's kind of when we first find out about the family. But it was actually in 2007 that we then start talking about the lead up to Andrew's disappearance.
Yeah, so like we've said with Andrew at school, he'd got 100% attendance rate, which is very rare, isn't it, to have a full 100%. And even though people had described him as a little bit quiet, he did have a very high IQ. He was very intelligent and very determined. So just a bit of a background to Andrew, really, because I think this is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
For in the lead up to the disappearance. So 2007, in the summer holidays, Andrew's parents actually suggested that he might want to go to London for a little bit. So they had family there. Andrew's grandparents were in London, and they said even at his age, he was pretty capable of knowing how the trains worked, knowing how to get tickets, getting to London and finding his way around on public transport, which I struggle with that now.
I know.
Like, never mind when you're that age. So he just must have been able to...
But again, Kevin says that Andrew is really determined, quite stubborn. So one of these kids, even at kind of the young age he was, by 14, if he believed that something was either right or that he wanted to do something, he'd figure out a way of doing it.
Yeah, even if other people didn't agree with him. But then I thought that is like, it's not out of the ordinary for a 14-year-old.
And I think if you've got a family that are quite close, quite understanding, you are given kind of more opportunity to be independent.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's exactly what Andrew did. This was during the 6 weeks holidays. So it's already quite a busy time. Again, Kevin said that they were busy. He was working one of the weeks. Glenys was actually part of running like a holiday kids club at the church. So the kids were going along to that. That was for a week. Glenys's family were over in Middlesbrough, so 1 week they were kind of seeing family. So it was quite
busy.
That's already 3 or 4 weeks that are taken up.
Yeah.
And so they'd given Andrew the opportunity to go and see family in London, which probably ordinarily he would have taken. But he actually turned round to Kevin quite honestly and said, you know what, I think I'd just like to laze about the house a bit. It's been really busy and I probably couldn't be bothered.
And probably in that lead up to going back to school, that's when you want to relax the most, isn't it? When you've got everything else out of the way. Yeah. So he didn't actually go to London, and he did just relax for the rest of the holidays before starting the school year back again in September.
Again, I think this shows that it's obviously a very comfortable family dynamic at home.
Yeah.
From interviews with Kevin, they seem so genuine and a really loving family.
Yeah.
It's not like Andrew was trying to get away from...
There's nothing that indicates any issues with Andrew's mental health, anything to do with bullying at school, anything to do in his home life. Again,
Andrew was described as being quiet and a deep thinker. But again, many people are, especially if you've been incredibly busy.
Yeah.
Very intelligent, which goes hand in hand with the good attendance. Comfortable with adults. And really had kind of, not an old sense of humour, but he appreciated kind of current comedians, but also loved old comedy from the 1960s. His dad, Kevin, did say that that's one of the things that he misses about his son was the jokes that they used to kind of tell each other and they used to watch these things together. So Andrew is polite, quietly spoken, thoughtful, and... Again, there's no sign of anything wrong.
No. So September comes round and the school year starts. Andrew went back to school as normal.
Yeah.
But then if we go to September the 13th, so not long into the school year, so this is in 2007 still, it seemed like just a regular day. So there's nothing out of the ordinary. The family had dinner together. Andrew and Kevin did a jigsaw. He watched some TV with his mom and went off to bed. So there's nothing to suggest, anything out of the ordinary. It was just a normal day.
And no, like, fractions within the family.
No.
Andrew was really close to Charlotte. In fact, one of my favourite kind of memories that Kevin shares is that they'd actually talked about getting a dishwasher.
Yeah.
And it was the kids, Andrew and Charlotte, that had said, oh, do you know what? Don't bother getting a dishwasher, because that's the point in which the family would all kind of catch up. Obviously, they had dinner together, but it sounds like they'd all be like in a line after tea washing the pots. So Glenys would be kind of doing the washing up, and then Kevin and the kids would be passing the washing up down the line to dry and put away. And I thought, again, this isn't a family that there's any tension or it's not fraught. Yeah. It sounds like they can have quite open conversations with each other.
Yeah, they have dinner together every night.
Yeah. So a really tight-knit family.
Yeah. So September the 13th is sort of in the lead up. So we know that nothing is wrong at this point. September the 14th, so the day after, started out like a sort of a normal day. Andrew had actually overslept, but only by about 20 minutes. So in that morning, Kevin had said, he was rushing around, he was trying to get ready, and just like you do if you've overslept. But he said he still managed to leave the house at the normal time in his school uniform. So he did get out of the house around about 8:05.
Now, again, there's speculation about the fact that Andrew was in a bad mood that day. This is something that his dad, Kevin, says isn't true.
Yeah.
Yes, he was in a rush, but he wasn't distant. He wasn't in a bad mood. And that is hearsay.
Yeah. So 8:05, Andrew leaves the house and was seen walking across the park to the bus stop, which was his normal route to go to his school bus stop. It was at this point, though, he actually made a diversion and he went to a cash machine at a local garage where he withdrew £200. So it's almost like as if he was on his way in his normal direction, and then all of a sudden there has been a diversion. So after he drew £200 out of the bank account, he then goes home and changes out of his school uniform. But when he changes out of his uniform, he puts his school trousers in the washing machine. He hangs his blazer up with his tie.
Yeah.
And he changes into a black Slipknot t-shirt, black jeans, trainers, and a watch. So this time he actually leaves the house, but he took a bag, a wallet, his keys, and his PSP console.
Yeah.
So there's no passport, there's no coat, and there's no charger. So this says he's going somewhere, but he's going to be coming back.
It's also important to note that this is a Friday. So if you've started school, you're not necessarily enjoying it. I think that transition period between kind of primary and secondary and then starting a new school year is really difficult. You're also at the age of like 13, so there's a lot going on.
And when you've just had the whole school holidays off, it's hard to just get back into the routine in general, isn't it? After having 6 weeks or 7 weeks off.
So is it just one of those things where he's gone, do you know what, I've never done it before, I'm always such a good student, I'm going to go on a bit of an adventure.
And if he's took his wallet and he's took his house keys, it means he's coming back to the house, doesn't it? If you take your house keys with you, because why else would you do that? So he's then left the house again at 8:30 a.m. and he was actually seen on a neighbour's camera heading in the direction of the local train station. So whilst he was in the train station, he actually bought a ticket to London. So there's also a little bit of speculation about this ticket because he bought a one-way ticket for £31.40. And the lady behind the counter pointed out to him, I think it was only 90p extra if he wanted to get a return.
Yeah.
He said no, and he took the one-way ticket. So loads of people were saying, that's an odd thing to do, just to get a one-way ticket.
Yeah.
But then in the interviews with his father, Kevin stated he would have just sorted that out at a later date. He might not have known when he was going to come back.
Equally, because he's got family and friends down there, it might have been one of those where they might have driven back up with him.
Yeah, they were going to stay there for a while.
To Kevin, that doesn't indicate that his son was leaving
away,
home and running away. Yeah.
Yeah, no, not at all. And the family as well, we've got to point out, were, they had a decent amount of money, and Kevin said he would have known that if he wanted a ticket back, we would have got him a ticket back.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't that much of an issue.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of speculation around that Kevin did sort of clear that up, didn't he, in his interviews?
Yeah.
So then at 9:35 a.m, Andrew was on the train headed for King's Cross.
So he's headed for King's Cross. We're trying to keep the timeline as simple as possible here. So what we're going to do, we'll kind of come back to that. But at this stage, it would now be clear to the school that Andrew, who has 100% attendance, hasn't turned up to school.
And this would have been so rare as well, so that probably would have made them respond to it a bit quicker than if it was a student who hadn't got such a good attendance rate, sort of thing.
Yeah, his parents, again, seem like the kind of parents that would ring in and say that Andrew's sick.
He's sick, he's not coming.
Yeah, if that was the case. So the school did actually flag that Andrew wasn't there, and they tried to contact his parents. They actually left a message because they couldn't get through, but it does turn out that unfortunately there was some kind of miscommunication, whether or not the number was written down wrong or they've typed it in wrong. But it wasn't actually Andrew's parents that were called, so they never received this message. This is referenced by Kevin, and he says he doesn't hold it against the school whatsoever because the timeline would have remained the same and the situation would have remained the same. They kind of wouldn't have been worried at that point either, necessarily. What then happens is that his family, so Kevin and Gladys, are completely unaware. His sister Charlotte is unaware.
They've probably just gone to work on a normal day, haven't they? Yeah.
They all come back home, and again, they didn't necessarily know that anything was wrong at that stage. They noticed that Andrew kind of wasn't around, but assumed that maybe he'd lost track of time. And it sounds like, again, he'd got a couple of really close friends, and they often went up to the snooker club. So it was only later on in the evening that they started trying to contact Andrew's friends to check whether or not he was with them.
I don't even think they rang him to check. I think they rang him to just be like, can you get him to hurry up and come home? Like, he's gone over time a bit. And, your tea's ready, sort of thing. Yeah. It wasn't as if they were particularly worried at this point. It was, he's probably just lost track of time. Yeah. And, we want to have his tea, sort of thing.
But it was when the friends then stated that Andrew wasn't with them and that he hadn't actually been at school that day that the family kind of then realised that potentially Andrew was missing, or at least they didn't know where he was.
And then the thing is, we're obviously not parents, so you can't, the panic that probably goes through your mind, but there's so many different reasons, like they went out and followed the school routes. Had he fallen over on his way to school, got injured, not been able to get up, not been able to get any help, had something happened, an accident on the way to school, and he'd ended up having to go to hospital. There's so many options, isn't there?
The other thing that they would have noticed is that Andrew actually put his shirt and his trousers in the washing machine before he left. So again, they'd have probably seen that and thought, oh, well, at some point he's come home from school, and then he might have gone back out again. Yeah. So the family had a lot of close family friends, and so they start asking around, asking if anyone's heard from Andrew. Kevin also said that some of his contacts through the church either worked at the school or knew someone. You know what it's like, especially round kind of my way. Everyone knows someone that knows someone. Yeah. But it was when they started to check hospitals and friends were saying that there was no information, that at 7 p.m. that evening, which was about 7.5 hours after Andrew had left the house, he was then reported missing. And again, I hate it because you get people that say he should have been reported missing earlier.
But
why? How would
But
that?
if you think about it, it's because when you say 7.5 hours after he went missing, it sounds like a long time, but they didn't find out.
No,
the parents
exactly.
didn't find out until they got home from work. What time do you finish work?
5-ish.
You might get in 5:30, 6. So technically, they rang the hospitals, followed the route, and then rang the police straight away. Like, you can't do it any quicker.
No. So things like that annoy us, but that's by the by.
Yep.
Again, at that point, they start thinking kind of other avenues. So the family's initial thoughts were likely that he might have actually gone to London or Whitby. That was another place that he really liked. And they'd got family and friends that lived across the country. They knew that Andrew was quite capable of getting places. So again, yes, you'd like to know where he is, but it doesn't sound... Well, Kevin said that they weren't necessarily hugely worried at that point.
They just expected him to turn up at a relative's house, didn't they, really?
Yeah.
Whether it be in Whitby, whether it be in London.
Yeah.
There were lots of different places that he could have gone.
Now, family are obviously asked to describe Andrew, and they did say that there had been a bit of a shift in the past year. So they noticed that he had started going out slightly less, but he was comfortable with people of all ages. As we've mentioned, quiet but determined. And they did say, again, this is another point that was raised, was that he'd actually quit Scouts. But again, Kevin says, look, he loved the camps. They were really fun. But the going every week and not doing an awful lot, he wasn't that fussed about. And he said he was
something else for this time. Yeah.
And he said he was only really going to be able to then go to the camp at the end of it. So decided to stop. Again, he had kind of stopped going to churches regularly, but so did his older sister Charlotte. Again, 13, you're figuring out, it's the first time, and again, it sounds ludicrous now as an adult, but 13 is when you start feeling like an adult, I think.
Yeah.
You start getting that bit of independence, and you do shift.
I don't think that's anything out of the ordinary.
No.
It's when children usually stop doing the hobbies, isn't it? Or, it's when you are making that shift.
And he's got a consistent group of friends. As I said, they all loved snooker. It sounds like he didn't necessarily love school, but I think that, again, comes with quite often very intelligent students when they're not getting that challenge. So they've provided now this description of Andrew to the police, but there's still nothing awry, really, in terms of a reason that Andrew might have left of his own accord. They did, at that point, note what he had taken. What was interesting is that he'd not taken the charger for the PSP.
Yep.
He'd not taken the coat. And the £200 is obviously a significant amount of money to get out of a bank account. However, he'd actually got up to £100 in his room in like Christmas money or birthday money that he'd been saving, but he hadn't taken that extra money.
Yeah.
So if you are planning on leaving for a prolonged period of time,
take everything,
you
wouldn't
take
you?
everything.
Yeah. So at this point, a search will have started. So you've got the search in local areas, but you've also got the search in, because Kevin had mentioned London and had mentioned Whitby.
Yeah.
So the searches not only started in Doncaster, but also around the relatives' houses in these different areas as well. And it wasn't actually until 3 days later that they found out that he'd travelled to London, because Kevin said that it was on a Friday when this happened. The lady who sold him the ticket was then off for the weekend.
Yeah.
She then came back in and had to wait for, obviously, the police to come and talk to her. Then she said, yes, I sold him the ticket, one-way ticket to London. And then I don't think they saw the CCTV at Doncaster train station, but they did actually get him on CCTV at King's Cross train station leaving. But it's that busy that train station,
Yeah.
it's easy to blend in. And obviously he's quite small as well. So
Yeah.
they did have trouble trying to pick him up on the CCTV. And even at first they were saying, oh, we don't know. We can't see him anywhere. Like,
So
we can't pick him out.
You've then, and again, the other CCTV that they got him on was walking away from the house towards the station.
Yeah.
But that was a local person's home. So again, by the time you've done the house-to-house inquiries, that's probably a day in. And these things do take time. It would be lovely if in an ideal world they all happened instantaneously.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's not the way it is.
And then you've also got South Yorkshire Police liaising with the British Transport Police to get the CCTV from the stations as well. Yeah.
It's one of these things where everything then kind of begins to unravel. So you've now got the account of the woman that sold him the ticket. She did say that it would have been an extra 50p or under £1 to get the return ticket, but that he was quite adamant that he didn't need it. But he was quite calm, quite collected. They did also get a witness statement from a woman that believed that she was actually sat next to Andrew on the train down to London. She said he had his head in his PSP. He was quiet, but again, polite and nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah. And then from this point, electronic devices were also looked at. So there was a theory that maybe he could have met someone online and travelled to meet them. So the police then looked at the school computers, didn't find anything. They looked at Andrew's sister's laptop.
She'd got a laptop a few months prior, and Kevin did say that as a family, they weren't all that into technology, really. Obviously, if Charlotte's a bit older, it probably would have been useful for her for like studying and stuff. But none of them were particularly bothered.
And you've got to think about social media at that time wasn't really as prominent as what it is now. You know, you didn't have all these social media things. Back then, you probably had Facebook at most. So it's not out of the ordinary for someone not to be on social media. His PSP, I don't think, was connected to the internet. His Xbox, as far as we know, wasn't connected to the internet. So
they even went further down the line. And again, a lot of this, obviously, we're talking about a case that unfortunately has been ongoing for a number of years now. So further down the line, they even went to Sony headquarters because you get like serial numbers on PSPs and Xboxes and things. But they even said that there'd been no activity kind of online on that account. There was no evidence. Kevin said, as far as they were aware, he didn't even have an email address.
Yeah.
So
he's he's very unlikely to be find a way to talk to someone online. But because it was one of the theories, I think the police probably had to disprove it more than anything.
Of course.
And you have to investigate it just to rule it out, I think, in this situation.
And again, I think what's really one of the things that shows how strong the family are is that they were so willing to accept any and all possibilities.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know, and so they're willing to explore it because ultimately they love Andrew, and no matter what the outcome is, they just want Andrew to be safe and well. So Kevin says even if he had decided, or even if he has decided to start a new life somewhere else, they won't hold it against him. It's just that they don't know. They don't have that answer. So it's really hard, but you've got to explore all possibilities.
But then so many people described Andrew as like kind and caring. So, you know, for him to not make contact and let his family know he was all right would have also been unusual and out of character.
And Kevin did say, even though they were close as a family unit of 4, Andrew was really close to his older sister, Charlotte. So if he was struggling potentially with something, it's unlikely that Andrew wouldn't have at least mentioned it to Charlotte.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what, as an older sister, you'd be going through as well.
Yeah.
Again, Kevin says that his wife Gladys and Charlotte actually went to the school. If, you know, Andrew went missing on the Friday, and on the Monday they were in an assembly asking for people if they had any information to kind of tell someone about it.
Yeah.
And it's just an awful situation that you can't imagine how to deal with. Again, Kevin said that they wanted someone at the house at all times in case Andrew rang the phone or came home, and then anyone else would then be out and trying to, again, just raise awareness and look for leads. Quite a lot of information has come from the family themselves as they've been looking. Another possible kind of potential route that they investigated was that Andrew might have, again, like we said at the beginning, gone on a bit of an adventure. And he was quite into a number of bands. He was obviously seen in a Slipknot t-shirt, but there were a couple of different gigs that were on in London.
And even museums and galleries. Like when you go to London, there's so much stuff to do and so much stuff to see that I bet he'd been down there with family previously, done quite a bit of it, and thought, oh, I'd love to come back down at some point and do this or this or this.
Yeah.
So the family actually got together like a sort of a calendar, didn't they, of every event that was on or that would have been on, and, you know, contacted people, asked them
for photos of the event,
photos from the events, anything like that. And nothing was found on that front.
2 gigs that he might have wanted to attend were actually in walking distance of the train station. So again, that would have made sense, but there were no leads. A year into the disappearance of Andrew, the head teacher, multiple teachers and some students actually went down to London with over 15,000 flyers. And again, just appealing for any information about where Andrew may be. But as I've just said, that then meant that we were a year into the investigation and there's still no news. There's potential sightings. So again, in looking at all of these areas that he may have been, there was a YouTube event on in Leicester Square that weekend of his disappearance. There is actually an image that does look similar to Andrew at that time, but his dad didn't believe that it was him. And also, based on what we've just been saying about internet and devices, there's nothing to suggest that Andrew had any interest in watching things on YouTube.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's so hard because his interest was more the music concerts, the museums, the galleries. YouTube doesn't really fit into that, does it?
Police searched the Thames, but they didn't search Regent's Canal. But again, you know, the police don't have an unlimited budget. They've kind of got to work with an area that they believe may have the highest possibility of evidence.
I thought in this, it's hard to know how the police handled the cases and how they dealt with the family back then. But there was a lot that I saw about the police not following up on leads quick enough. So there was a sighting of Andrew in Covent Garden in Pizza Hut. And by the time the police had gone to interview the witness and then check the CCTV gets overridden every
3 to 4
3
weeks.
to 4 weeks. So then, because it was 6 weeks, they didn't have that CCTV. Because in London, I was thinking even back then, it's quite hard not to be picked up on any cameras anywhere. But then if they are being taped over, you know, you've only got that 3-4 week window, haven't you?
What was significant about that lead, because the family do believe that that is a legitimate sighting of Andrew. Again, it wasn't far from where he would have been at that point in time in London. They knew that he liked the Covent Garden area, and the Pizza Hut that he was seen in. They described a young, polite boy who ordered a ham and pineapple pizza, and they said that that is something that he would have ordered. So it is quite a strong lead, but then unfortunately it couldn't be backed up with CCTV evidence because it wasn't followed up kind of in time. Obviously now we're talking in 2026 and the family still really struggle with whether or not they believe that Andrew is still alive. Again, as I've said, Kevin is very... there's a lot of strength in the family's logic, I think. And they say it is possible that he might have wanted to start a new life for whatever reason. But again, they don't believe that he'd have done that without letting someone in the family know. Did he want to reinvent himself? Apparently one of his favourite films was it's called The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin. And in that, the kind of plot is that someone fakes his own death. So whether or not they'd seen that. But again, these are the thoughts that you'd be having at 4:00 in the morning as a family member, just trying to make sense of what's happened.
And one thing that they did do as the years have gone by is they've had progression images released to the public.
Yeah.
So obviously a 14-year-old boy is not going to look anything like what he looks like now.
No.
So it's going to be hard to send flyers out and people to recognise him. So the age progression images were actually released to the public, and there's like databases that are checked on a yearly basis. So John Does in hospitals are all checked on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
But so far, nothing.
We're going to give a full description of Andrew at the end of the episode. But again, in terms of these age progression photos, he's got quite dark hair. And he's got quite a distinctive ear. So it's almost like a ridge pattern on his ear, his kind of upper ear, that it's almost like 3 ridge lines, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is distinctive. But in the age progression photos, they have pictured Andrew with longer hair that would be covering the ear. So although, again, it's like with other disappearance cases where you think, well, who wouldn't notice that?
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy to conceal something if you don't want people to see it. So that's something to bear in mind. Again, the family are very honest about everything. So Kevin says, yes, he's wondered whether or not his son might have been struggling with something that he hadn't shared with the family, because as much as they do appear that they are a close-knit family, there are always secrets that you can keep from family, and if you want to.
There's always subjects that are not as easy to talk about.
Yes, and whether or not your parents are really accepting.
Yeah, sexuality is going to be one of them. Although Kevin did say that, you know, with their circle of friends, he thought Andrew would know that he would be accepted. Yeah. But it's not as easy as that, is it, at the time when you're going through it as a 14-year-old? And I think they did sort of reach out to the gay community on this as well, didn't they, for their help?
Because they basically said, well, like Kevin says, they would have, they accept Andrew, but you've got to accept yourself, haven't you, really, before you're probably willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
So again, they want Andrew to know that if that is something that he has struggled with, or if that is why he left, then they love him, and that, you know, that doesn't matter. Again, if it's something that he felt like he couldn't speak to his family about, they still feel that he would have got in touch with someone or contacted someone.
Yeah, because another thing with the bank account as well, you know, when he drew the £200 out of the bank account right at the beginning, Andrew's dad, Kevin, actually put some money in that bank account for him.
Yeah, this is
just
really
because he
tough,
thought he's got his card with him. If he's in trouble and he needs somewhere to stay for the night, there's money in that bank account. And ever since that day, that account has never been touched.
No, so that's a Santander account that's never been touched. Again, the investigation might have been slow to begin with, but they are constantly trying to make headway. And what they also did, which I thought was very clever, because Andrew has this really strong prescription for his glasses, they actually keep looking for other people with similar prescriptions, because that condition, that
in itself is distinctive, isn't it?
But that's not going to go away, is
it?
So if he does need contact lenses or glasses, then you would think that somewhere along the line, someone would be ordering that prescription. Maybe they could find Andrew that way. Another thing that they've done is to look to see whether or not anyone has registered for a new national insurance card. But again, that hasn't happened. So even 10 years plus, there's still really no solid leads. Kevin does say at this point in time, there's a really good police contact that they've got, and he says, hand on heart, most officers that they came into contact with were brilliant, but he does say that he doesn't really think he should talk about how it was handled at the time. And unfortunately, you're never going to get a perfect investigation, but there's always things that
in hindsight they could have done better. Maybe, yeah.
So it is really tough. But again, Kevin admits it's chaotic, and it was chaotic to begin with, and that it was potentially not an ideal team. Again, when you've got a really strong family unit with lots of friends and family, that is a lot of people to try and match up information from.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. But the strongest two leads were witnesses that weekend that believed they saw Andrew. So realistically, potentially the last time anyone has seen Andrew was at either the Pizza Hut or Covent Garden in London. Again, the height, general appearance, all of that matched, but there's no CCTV to back it up. There's another potential sighting that was just a day later in a park, and one 5 days later. But these then started to get kind of more and more weak as leads.
Yeah, and there might be people that look similar as well. Like, and then if it's already in your head and you think it's them, you know, people can be misleading without meaning to be misleading.
Yes, of course, because
your witnesses.
Yeah, but then there's sightings in Brighton, Wales, all over the country, and so investigating that is incredibly difficult. Again, Kevin says that he never really thought of this as being an issue, but as you say, anyone that may look like Andrew, if they had social media accounts, they were then being messaged directly and asking whether or not they were the missing Andrew, which is really tough for just people that are going about their lives. Something potentially quite significant happened then in November 2008, because a man actually walked into a police station. So this is in Herefordshire, which is... It's further away from the centre of London, but it's still kind of down the south of the country. And this person claimed that he had information about Andrew. However, you can't just walk into certain police stations. So he actually spoke to someone via the intercom. When police then came to speak to this potential witness, he'd vanished. They do believe that this was potentially a legitimate source of information, because apparently this specific police station was a bit kind of further out, not in the city centre, and on like an industrial estate.
You're not just going to pass it, are you? You're not just going to walk past it and think, on the chance I'll go in. You have to go out of your way to go to this particular police station.
However, Kevin did raise the very good point that even if you had significant information, would you not stick around? Would you not wait? Potentially they've got spooked, but then again, would you not try and give that information at a later date?
Yeah.
The next thing that happened was actually a letter which went to the BBC, again stating that they'd seen a sighting of Andrew over in Shrewsbury, but again, this has never been confirmed. Kevin's seen the letter that was sent to the BBC, and again, it just isn't sure if these are legitimate based on the fact that if you had information and you did have Andrew's best interest at heart, would you not follow it up and make sure that it could be rightly investigated?
Yeah, definitely.
What happened after this, so that was 2008. By 2011, the family have never once wavered in their search for Andrew, and they decided to pay for a private company to search the Thames. Obviously, in that first investigation, they wouldn't have searched the whole of the Thames, so they conducted their own search. They actually found a body in the search, but it was confirmed that it wasn't Andrew. I can't even begin to imagine how that would feel. If you imagine you've gone
It's
all
just
of
a roller
those
coaster of
years,
emotions, isn't it?
and it's just a constant,
and it's just
down.
the unknown as well, isn't it? When someone's missing,
Yeah.
it is just the unknown of it.
By 2017, at this point, Andrew would now be 24. Again, this is when they are looking for prescriptions. Again, reminding people that he has this particular ear ridge. And the other thing that they also investigated were for people that had applied for new passports.
Yep.
Because if Andrew started a new life somewhere, chances are you would be going about a normal new life.
You need some form of ID,
so
wouldn't
you?
you?
Some form of ID. But Andrew has never applied for a new passport. They even have DNA from his dressing gown, but that has never come up on the database, which, as Annie said, as they check for kind of John Doe cases, it's never come up against anything for that. Again, there was another case which people have tried to potentially link to Andrew's disappearance, and that is the missing persons case of Alex Slowly, who was 16, and he went missing. But the similarity there
is very similar.
It was 11 months after Andrew left and disappeared. He was also incredibly intelligent, also a gifted mathematician, and people said all these two cases related. But there's nothing other than the timeline being quite similar and that they were gifted and both very intelligent.
And similar,
there's no actual evidence.
No link to those cases, is there? And then we've got the sort of the last one in June in 2017. An online conversation was recorded. So this was a conversation between someone with the username Andy Rue, and they thought that this was particularly of importance because Kevin used to call Andrew Rue as a nickname. So to be called Andy Rue.
And they'd not reported that anywhere, had they really?
This wasn't known to like the media or anything like that. It was just something only your sort of close family and friends would have known. So this message from the Andy Rue account was asking for, saying that they needed some money, they needed to borrow some money to pay the rent. Their partner had just left them and they didn't have enough to cover it. So, could they help them out? So this person said, yes, I will help you out this time. But give me your bank details and transfer the money over. I'll put the money in your bank account.
Yeah.
Into which the Andy Rue profile responded saying they didn't have a bank account as they left home at 14.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarities between that, and I don't want to say coincidences, but if the Andy Rue thing.
Yeah. So it was at that point that whoever was communicating with this Andy Rue account thought that that was strange. And the only reason that they thought that was strange is because, again, unfortunately, people do forget about these cases.
Yeah.
And it was around the 10th anniversary of Andrew's disappearance. So Andrew's case was back in the press, back in the news, and they'd actually seen it come up, and that had reminded them of Andrew's case, and then reminded them of this conversation that they'd had about 6 weeks prior. So they actually brought it to the attention of Kevin and the family, and at that point things started clicking into place. Unfortunately, with and this is the problem with technology, that person had changed their devices recently, because this was 6 weeks ago, and so the chat log had been lost. But Kevin said that was kind of the first plausible lead that they believed, that they'd really had in a really long period of time. And this user, this Andy Rue, stated that they were living in Lincoln, in the Lincolnshire area, which again is closer back up towards Doncaster, kind of in the Midlands. So the family decided to look at it into more detail. But again, it's really hard. You've lost that chat log. This person only is working with the information that they had.
Yeah.
And you've got nothing else to go on. They said that they were going into kind of supermarkets and local shops in Lincoln and the Lincolnshire area.
Because if they said that if he'd got a job in a local shop, they thought it must have been a smaller business that he was working for because of the lack of ID that he had and things like that. So they thought it would be a small business that would employ him.
So again, the family put out, again, thousands of flyers. They were checking dentists, shops, things like that. But nothing came of it.
No.
And again, just as you think you're kind of getting somewhere, it must be heartbreaking.
Yeah.
What I did find interesting, you mentioned that Kevin had put money into Andrew's account, which has never been touched. Again, everything that the family have done, they've made the police aware of. And the police actually said, when Kevin was about to put the money into the account, don't put too much in there, because that could potentially allow Andrew to get further away and make it more difficult for us to be able to find him. But if you only put maybe £100 in there, that would
enough
be
for a
enough
bit of food or hotel or whatever he wanted for the night.
Which I did think went to show that there must have been a good relationship with the police to a certain extent, because they are working together there to get some answers as to where Andrew is. So in 2019, that was the last age progression image that's been created. But unfortunately, as I say, we're now in 2026 and anniversaries
just keep coming, don't they?
And there is still no information for the family. So there's a couple of things that we're going to do now. Obviously, the ultimate aim is to find out what has happened to Andrew. If Andrew is still alive, just any word for the family to know that he is safe. They just want answers as to what may have happened. And there's a couple of ways that we want to try and do our bit to help raise awareness. So if you have any information on this case, you can actually ring 166 000. We'll put all of this information in the show notes. And Andrew's case is... We'll quote the reference number. There's a missing people reference number. You can also speak to South Yorkshire Police on 101, quoting an incident number, which we'll put in the show notes. You can speak to Crimestoppers anonymously. But again, I'm just going to give a really comprehensive kind of account of Andrew. So key information is that he will need glasses or contact lenses. Don't forget that Andrew is actually deaf in one ear. So he may appear to be someone who doesn't quite catch what you say if you talk quietly. He might have to turn directly to look at you to be able to hear. He has that distinctive ear ridge on his ear. Andrew himself has always spoken quite quickly, but also quite quietly, and is very good at mental arithmetic. He has dark hair, but again, it could have dyed his
Could
hair.
have changed by now, couldn't it? 'Cause it's so long ago. And obviously there's no point in us giving you the heights and what he was wearing when he went missing, because it's irrelevant now.
So
but we'll see if we can get the age progression images in.
Yeah, and the bulk of the information about Andrew's case is on a website that's been set up by his father. So we're going to put a link to that website in there. There's a lot of information on there, and there's also an open letter to Andrew directly from his family. It's a heartbreaking case, and hopefully one day there will be answers for the family. Hopefully, if Andrew is out there, he is safe wherever he is. And it's a case that I think is really important that we still cover because it's ongoing.
And the family need answers, don't they, after all this time?
So, as I say, we will put all of the information that we can in the show notes, in the descriptions, and we'll put posts out about it as well.
Yep.
But even if you don't have any information, make sure that you share.
Like and share, because that pushes us more out there, and the more we can get seen, the more we can get this information out there.
Yeah. So hopefully we've done this case justice. If you've got any information at all, please get in touch with us or get in touch directly with the website that we're going to post.
All the information from today will be in our show notes for you to click on.
And thank you very much for listening. Take care.
Bye.